MysteryWire.com, home of the unusual and unknown. From Area 51 to the paranormal, it's your source to the most vetted UFO stories and special investigations in the world. Take a journey into the universe of MysteryWire.com.
All right. Hi, everybody. Glad to have you with us here. Protect yourself at all times. We are on it, ready to go with another Mystery Wire podcast. Got the crew all here. This is sort of fun here today. I'm at the Channel 8 studios, and we've got remote viewing. Oh, remote viewing. Hold on. That's not the topic of today, but we can talk about it if you want. But remote viewing via Zoom with George Knapp at his home studio. Glad to have you here. Matt Adams, of course, and Duncan Phoenix, and Jeremy Corbell, first time on the podcast here. Jeremy, filmmaker of all things mystery as well. So certainly glad to have you guys with us here. We're going to jump right in. I'm Ron Futrell, and we're going to jump right into the Joe Rogan show. You guys took off down to the studios there to do the show in studio with Joe Rogan. George, your thoughts? The reaction has been absolutely phenomenal for that show, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming. You know, Jeremy had been on it before, so we had an inkling what was going to happen. I get a lot of email, and I get a lot of text and tweets and everything pretty much every day, more than I can handle. But since this Rogan thing, it's gone to a different level. It's huge. We knew it would be huge, and it's great. I mean, most of the stuff we're getting to the public is very encouraging. The UFO community has been encouraged. I think most of them are thrilled that we're able to talk about this stuff on such a big platform, and it is big. There are some that aren't crazy about it. I'm getting the emails. I'm sure, Jeremy, you're seeing it on social media too, where they're saying, well, why didn't you ask this? Well, why didn't you say that? Why didn't you talk about my book? And basically it boils down to, why are you on there and not me? And so we get a little bit of that. I can understand it, but it's been a great experience. Matt and I documented the whole thing. We put a story together, called it Road Trip to Rogan. Knew that people would be interested in seeing sort of the behind the scenes of what it was like. It's been in the works for a while now. Jeremy's been working on Joe for a while to set this into motion, and maybe he can tell that part of the story.
Yeah, Jeremy, how did that work out? Because I know I've heard you on there, certainly with Bob Lazar before, listening to Joe Rogan, and I download his podcast on a regular basis, so I'm a listener of his and enjoy this stuff. So yes, it's not your first time on there, but it was a long road to finally get George and everybody together to make this happen, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't something that I pushed. For me, it was round 3 of UFOs with Joe, and I'm super grateful that he looks for credible individuals to expand the conversation to the public about this topic, which we can't deny it, and by denying it, we're putting our heads in the sand. So it's really Joe's curiosity. He's just looking for credible people. I never asked him to be on the podcast. He asked me. And then he asked me to bring individuals on the podcast with me who he saw value in their perspective. And for me, the coup de grace was to have George come on, because George is the Akashic record of high strangeness. 30 plus years reporting on this, and everybody just now today catching up with his story. So Joe's interest in the UFO topic, because he's gone back and forth because of the insanity, which we all have, because it's such a treacherous briar patch. But really, I have to credit Joe, because his personal interest and then finding a way to access the individuals and whatnot. So we've had the dialogue going on since my first movie, Patient 17, that came out on Netflix. It's like, that dialogue was there, but I think now having 3 or 4, if you include me, credible guests to talk about the UFO topic, it opened a public discussion in ways that were not possible without the powerful Joe Rogan. So really, that's my takeaway, is we can now start asking these questions in a popular pop culture kind of way. And I think it's so important. It was so amazing to have George Knapp sitting with Joe, going through everything. And it's brief and it's quick, and you don't get to go into depth into each thing, but people ask questions now. So I'm really happy George was sitting there right in front. Let's go.
We, this has been a long time in the works. It started after Jeremy's film about Bob Lazar came out. As he mentions, Joe has had, and we put it in the story, Rogan has had sort of a love-hate relationship with UFOs. I think he has a natural curiosity about it, like we all do. You know, what the heck is this story on this? Is it real? What's legit out there and what isn't? And you've seen he's done these other shows with people, I think, who've come on and they made his skin crawl. You know, they just seemed like they were smarmy and self-promotional and not very solid with facts. And so he's recoiled from it. You know, he gets a taste of that and he backs off of it for a while, but his natural curiosity sort of brings him back to it. And he reached out to us. There's a photo I took when we were at Lazar's house in Michigan. Rogan calls on my cell phone and we're all having this three-way conversation with him, Lazar, Jeremy, and me. And I took a photo of that conversation that's going on. Rogan's making his pitch. And in the background was a poster of Lazar and me and John Lear. It's a cool little, I'll have to find that photo. But it started there. And then when he got Lazar, I think Jeremy had encouraged him to eventually have me, and in between was Dave Fravor. So Joe's had a pretty big download on UFO related issues over the last 2 years. And I think he's in for the long haul, which is good for the topic.
And with you guys talking about how this is new to some people, and it's great to have this out in the public discourse now. You're not kidding. With Rogan alone, your podcast from the other day has already got 2.5 million views on YouTube and counting. I'm sure there's a few more by the time I looked at that. As of last night, 4 days after the recording, it was the most popular podcast episode in the world, according to Apple Podcasts.
Now, just the world, just the whole world. You're
Just
saying,
the world.
Duncan.
Just planet Earth.
Okay, so this
Yes.
just this planet here. Okay, just checking. We don't
So
know.
there
Could be other places too.
Yeah. There definitely is that want to know.
Yeah.
So we probably got a lot of new people to this community, to Joe Rogan, taking a look at this. You guys were there with Joe in the room. I know him, growing up, I know him from Fear Factor. I know he was a comedian, still is. But what's the guy like in person?
Well, I just want to back up before what you said. Let me put a highlight on that. So the Bob Lazar interview with Joe, I mean, Joe really wanted to know, as I did when I was 13 years old, you know, is George and Bob, are they all making this up, or is this real? Joe wanted to know. The Bob Lazar episode is within the top 12 ever in the history of the Joe Rogan podcast, with over 11 million views. The audience listening is at least double that, from what I understand. So we're talking about a pop culture understanding, a mass viewing, a conversation that is being open to the general public in light of what we've learned because of George's reporting starting in 1989, all the way up through the release by the New York Times. Hey, UFOs are real. Our military studies them. So the power of, say, being the number one podcast listened to and downloaded on planet Earth, it doesn't happen with everyone, but that's huge, man. And that happened with the Lazar one, and then the Fravor one got traction, and then now this one with George. It's really powerful. You're getting the world to start asking these questions from a different perspective. UFOs are real. The reality, the presence of UFOs within our skies is real. Commander Fravor is a great example of that. But what's going on? As George's and Matt's friend Robbie Williams says, something's up. So the fact that the mass pop culture is embracing these stories, even though we're still figuring it out, we're trying to figure it out. Now we have people asking questions from all walks of life. Because guess what? The UFO phenomenon, it's not selective. Everybody experiences, sees, knows somebody with this. So I just want to make sure before we move into your question of what is Joe like in person, which, of course people want to know, that's really important. It's important that these questions are being asked in a pop culture setting. And Joe said it, that the Lazar film, people were so hungry for it. Having that film on Netflix, having Hunt for the Skinwalker on Hulu, having Patient 17 on Netflix, this has reached a pop culture threshold that we have not seen before. And you can ask George, he's been on this story, and Matt, for decades. And guess what? The conversation has changed. So
well,
back
Matt,
to
I'd like to, with that, I'd like to get Matt's thoughts on that. Certainly, Matt, you were down there. You've been with George for you said decades, for a long time as a photojournalist, been there recording all of this stuff. Matt, your thoughts?
Well, I'd like to back up a little bit too, just about the the way that it rolled out, getting George to go on Joe Rogan, and I think Jeremy did a really masterful job of bringing the people in. Bringing in Lazar, who had a story to tell, but he can't tell the whole story. And then he brings Fravor in, who has a story to tell, but he can't tell the whole story. And so to wrap it all up, somebody that can connect the dots, can make all the connections, can do it in a concise and intelligent way without talking about little green men, but just talking about the technology and what's going on. I think that was a great thing. And so George kind of put an exclamation point on the whole thing. I think it's kind of disappointing with all the news that's going on in the world right now. The New York Times article was huge. It caught a lot of traction, but people still doubted. There were questions about Elizondo. There were questions about the veracity of the tapes that they let out. There were all these questions that people had that if they just knew really what was going on in the background, they wouldn't have had these questions. But then in the middle of all this craziness we're going through, the Pentagon says, yeah, these are 3 unidentified flying objects. The Pentagon says this. They said unidentified. I don't know. It just seems like they didn't catch the same traction as you think that it would. So it's great that George was able to go on Rogan to bring it up to a huge audience, and maybe an audience that's paying a little closer attention than the average news cycle.
Everybody's picking up your reports, guys. I mean, it's like, when George reports on something and you film it and edit it, Matt, and put it out, you can see the cycle of time. It takes a while. You guys did a report on Papoose Lake, and then all of a sudden, just today, Fox News does a report on Papoose. It's like everybody's catching up to what you guys have clarified. You have proven all of these things that people bicker about on social media, but that's okay. It's okay, because ultimately what you've said, what you've reported on, is catching in popular media. So yeah, man, it's great work you guys have done. I admire it.
Back to Rogan. George. So back to Rogan. So it was a lot of anticipation about this. We knew what the stakes were kind of high, how big his audience is. But Jeremy had told me about Joe and what he's like, and I had talked to him a couple times on the phone, and we've been texting back and forth for a couple of years. And so I wasn't intimidated by him, but just by the opportunity. He's a very personable guy, very intense, but personable. Matt and I we made the road trip to Rogan, and we make our first gas stop. There's Matt filling up the car. I go inside to get some coffee, and there's an Area 51 sign, warning Area 51 sign. I thought that was like a harbinger or foreshadowing. Then we go to, we stop at Edwards Air Force Base, see the sign, take a picture of it, and tweeted it out, which launched 1,000 conspiracy theories about what we're really up to, and we're about to break the big news about Edwards. I mean, we wanted to get some video of Edwards for something we're working on, but it was nothing more than just a travelogue part of the story. And then getting down there and heading to Joe's place, which I guess he does not let people know where it is. It's not earth-shattering secret Hangar 18 kind of a thing, but he doesn't want fans showing up and banging on the door when he's doing the show. So we didn't record that part of the trip and didn't indicate where we were going. We get in there and Joe's not there yet. And they asked me you want to do a COVID test? Yeah, whatever is needed. We want to be safe. I'm fine with it. And they swab my nose. This lady comes in, swabs the nose, and then there's a second test to draw blood. And it was You can't see it, but it was.
Oh, we can see it.
We can see it. We can see it.
It did not go smoothly. And just at that point where the blood is spurting out and on my arm and filling up these 2 vials, Rogan walks in and says, "What the hell are you doing?" I guess they were using the wrong test. Yeah, you don't have to do that. I mean, she's taking a test that I won't get the results for a week, I guess.
Oh.
Doesn't do us a lot of good about going into studio an hour later. But
let's clarify that. I want to be really clear on this. So the idea is that, you're taking a little bit of risk with COVID. You're adopting a position where you're in a closed room, with 3 people. So we all self-isolated prior to that. And the idea was to get a rapid response blood test, a little finger prick. And so we signed up these documents, and she says, "Who wants to go first?" And George says, "I'll go first." And I'm like, good. I'm kind of a wimp, And then all of a sudden I see this needle coming, like this horse needle, and there's blood draining out his arm. And I'm like, this does not seem like what we signed up for. Turns out the results are not going to come back in time to make any meaningful difference in the room. Of course, we all self-quarantined, the 3 of us before. But man, so I just step back. I go, whoa, nope, not happening today. So George was probed, prodded, and he bled for this podcast. And it was really something to see.
Thank you, George.
Rogan was, he was great. He's very personable. He puts you at ease, very professional, but to the point, get down to business. We chatted for a little bit. I brought along something. I wanted to bring him something from Las Vegas. Of course, he knows Las Vegas. He's been here many times. So I wanted to find something that he could not get. And what I gave him was a baseball cap from the Las Vegas 51s. And the reason you can't get them is because they changed the name. You might find somewhere on eBay or here at my house. But if you'll notice during the show, he wore that hat, 51's hat. And of course, the 51s changed their name because of all the hoopla that we had stirred up about Area 51 and Bob Lazar over the years after the ET Highway was commissioned by the governor. So that was a cool little point that people might not notice. Now they can tune into it as they watch the podcast.
Yeah, Joe's a really good guy. He's got a strong BS meter. He gets to the point. He's brutally honest. He wants the facts. He wants to know the truth. He wants good evidence. Look, like we all do. And you're not going to get it real quick in a sound bite. It takes time. But as you can see, he's opened the doors to that. He's dedicated himself to learning more and getting in there. And that's what you saw in that episode, is somebody motivated to engage the conversation, to get people to start talking. And that's powerful. It's powerful coming from someone like Joe. I admire it.
Brought along.
But he also grills you guys. He grilled you, George. Okay, here's the thing. This wasn't just an interview, a softball interview. He made you account for certain things during the interview, which you expected nothing less, I'm sure.
Yeah, there was no prep. There's no, hey, what do we talk about? He didn't even ask for a bio. There was no introduction. It just, boom, go. And I brought along a couple copies of Hunt for the Skinwalker, the book, in case we wanted to get into that. I don't know if you'd ever read it or not. And Jeremy had made a film about it. So I thought, well, maybe we're going to get into that. I don't know how much he's read about it, but yeah, that's what he was really grilling us on. And, the bottom line is if you're looking for a lot of physical evidence with Skinwalker, there isn't a lot. There's some, but not a lot. And it's non-repeatable, and it's always unexpected. The new team that's there, the Skinwalker team, that's Brandon and his team that bought the ranch and have been working on the TV show for History Channel, have collected a lot of information. They got videos and photos and things of that sort. But if it boils down to what's going on there, we still don't know. I mean, there is no answer for it. So I wasn't going to argue with Rogan about it. If you do not buy the premise that there is an intelligence there that is elusive, that gives you glimpses of itself over the years, never in quite the same way, and messes with your mind, and it's not amenable to a scientific investigation. That was sort of the premise of the book and of Jeremy's film, is you had scientists who went there, who were on the property stretched out over a course of 20 years, and science got its butt kicked, basically. It tried to apply the scientific method to what goes on there, to measure things, to collect evidence, but it got its butt kicked because whatever it is that's operating there defies description and defies identification. And while I wish the current team all the success, and I think they've made great strides, and the bottom line is we don't know what it is that's there. It's hard to convey that to somebody like Joe, who is asking, well, where's the proof? Where's the videos of flying saucers and stuff like that? And there aren't very many. That's just the fact.
And you also have a lot of, you know, what you commonly call debunkers out there, who people, their only goal in life is to prove you wrong. And you guys have had to run that, play that role also, debunking the debunkers. Jeremy, I'll throw it to you. I got one question for you. Are you sure it's not a bird?
Check it out. Let's get specific. There are 3 videos that were released by our government that says these are unidentified. We're talking about $6 million FLIR pods targeting in on enemy combatants. This is stuff we use in war. This is not an iPhone. This is not Instagram. So when these videos come out, there's people that are dead set on isolating information to just the visual thing you're seeing in the video, okay? There's an ocean of data that is being completely and recklessly dismissed in order to reduce what you're seeing to something prosaic. This does not take a genius. It doesn't even take a smart person to do this. To try to warp the data, events, and information into something that is completely explainable, like a bird. However, I won't cuss, but they're effing wrong. And not only that, but it is my job, my self-proclaimed job, to jump in the trenches from time to time and call it out as I see it. So with each video, when you say, okay, is it a bird? Let's get specific. So you've got the Go Fast video, one of the 3 released videos. It's absolutely not a bird. You don't need a pilot to tell you that, who actually filmed it and saw it. You can just simply look. The craft that is moving along the ocean is colder than the surface of the ocean. At that time, at that place, surface temperature of the ocean was about 65 degrees. A bird is about 115 degrees body temperature, like a seagull. They become hypothermic at like 78 degrees. They would drop like a rock into the ocean, bang. Yes, I'm sure it's not a bird. Here's a more preposterous one. People said that Commander Fravor saw illumination, reflection from his tic-tac shaped instruments inside of his cockpit on his window shield, and that somehow explains the tic-tac UFO. Okay, so the bird theory is for the birds. It's total BS. Now here's also the deal. People go around, they analyze these little videos. I just talked with the pilot. I recorded audio with the pilot who filmed the tic-tac. He's never done an audio recording. I just did that. I'm going to release it. He will tell you there was instantaneous acceleration. It lost lock. The Raytheon FLIR pod lost lock because of the instantaneous motion to the left. Doesn't matter if he 2 times zoomed in or anything like that. No, it's not a bird. That one, which is the tic-tac UFO video called FLIR 1, it was not a distant plane. It was not any aircraft with any type of heat signature, plume, wings, tails, rotors, anything we've ever seen. So you've got the Go Fast, not a bird, it's a craft. Second one, you got the FLIR 1, commonly known as the tic-tac. It is not a distant plane. And I'm going to definitively prove that again to debunk the debunkers, because people need to know the truth. And thirdly, and this is one that you can bet on this horse deeply. I've been working on this. That gimbal video, the self-rotating craft that looks oddly like the one Bob Lazar described, it is self-rotating. It is not glare, which is not the right word, or flare, a thermal signature. That craft is mechanically rotating against the wind at 120 knots was the wind. I am going to prove that definitively. I'll probably use Twitter as my messenger, my harbinger of doom for the debunkers. All 3 videos represent unidentified aerospace vehicles that are maneuvering with technologies that our military, any arsenal on planet Earth, does not have. So it's important sometimes to jump in and give people a little slap and a wake-up call and say, you can't just disseminate false information, and particularly about those 3 videos. And I'm going to the sources. I'm not just telling this to you because I believe it.
It's important for people like Jeremy, or only Jeremy, to take them on one at a time and debunk the debunkers and show why their theories do not hold water. But they won't stop there. Once the balloon theory and the bird theory and the glare and the flare are debunked, they'll come up with swamp gas or flying fish or something else, so long as it's not unidentified. But it is preposterous on its face to think that the US government, the US military, the analysts at CIA and DIA who have looked at this stuff, the Pentagon experts who've looked at it, the Navy experts, all the people who analyzed the sensor data, interviewed the pilots, looked at the radar scope, have the information that some of these craft jammed the radar, an act of war in there. I mean, a bird can't jam radar, right? So they had this information about Tic Tac since 2004, and we're analyzing it. They've had the gimbal and go fast videos since 2015, and they've come up and reluctantly, grudgingly had to say, these are unidentified. The job of the Pentagon has been traditionally to muddy the waters. If they can find a way to muddy the waters and discredit a UFO case, they'll do it. Swamp gas, as an example. They can't. They haven't been able to debunk these, so they've had to admit it's unidentified. And it's not just admitting it to us, the public. They've had to tell Congress that. They've gone behind closed doors to the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services Committee and said, these are unidentified. Here's the pilots that saw it. Here's the radar data. It's unidentified. It's not a bird. And the fact is, if it were a bird or a balloon and all of our systems failed, our pilots failed, that's a bigger concern than flying saucers from other planets. It indicates that we're totally incompetent in protecting our country. And of course, that is not the case. These things are unidentified. They're not birds or balloons or flares. And that it is preposterous on its face for the Twitfologist to propose this over and over again and move from one excuse to another.
I don't want to give debunkers a bad name here. First of all, that's what we do. I mean, we do that more than we do anything else is debunk. You don't know how many times I've had to tell a very disappointed, very powerful man that, no, I'm so sorry. That's not what I think you think it is. So you get to a situation that we're in now with the 3 videos. They're trying to debunk them. That's a little bit different than the way we do it and the way we go about it. We look for the explanation. They're just throwing everything at the wall and hoping that one of them sticks. They're not giving a single logical thought through explanation. And to criticize Fravor saying that he saw something reflecting back into his cockpit, I would love that person to say that to Commander Fravor's face.
Oh yeah, it's Matt. Matt, we've seen it. You've seen it, Matt. You're not. Let's back up. You're not debunking stuff. You're trying to find out what the facts are, and you're including all the data. The difference and the danger is when people isolate information to try to reduce it to the point of absurdity. You don't do that. So that's a big difference. Yeah, I'm debunking things all the time, get videos all the time, from people, and I have to tell them, I'm sorry, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's not even Superman. The difference is with the journalism that you guys do, you're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. You're not starting with an agenda and trying to reduce it to there. We need to encourage and accept the magnitude and the scope of data when we look at anything. So it's very different. We should shame those debunkers that dismiss data to prove their point, which is not something that the I-Team does,
And if, for any of you guys, anyone that's listening, watching this, if you need your own proof, we've provided it on mysterywire.com to put our own self-plug in there, and it's many other places too. You can go on there, you can watch those 3 Navy videos right now. You can watch the interviews with that George has done with Fravor. We've linked, of course, back to Joe Rogan's podcast when he's interviewed all these people. It's all out there. You don't have to look that hard. We've tried to curate it and collect it all at Mystery Wire. You guys can go on there and watch it to your heart's delight. For the videos, we've got the unedited videos, so they're not safe to play loudly at the office because there is a little bit of cussing on them. But you can go on there and see them just as they were recorded.
Jeremy says freaking again in one or two of the videos, probably, huh?
Somebody tell me I can't cuss again.
Freaking! Oh, he's got the Rogan inspired laser gun. Okay, you talk about the government. You talk about the government in this case acknowledging that they don't know. That wasn't always the case. You look at Roswell in 1947. They tried desperately to come up with an answer, which was foolish. The weather balloon. So their history is trying to cover things up. Now, what has changed now all of a sudden that the government is being, dare I say, honest? I hate to put that tag on our government, but perhaps the evidence is so strong that they have to, in this case, be a little bit honest just by saying they don't know. George?
What's changed is they've been forced to come clean on some of this stuff. Forced by Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, Tom DeLonge's TTSA organization, and the New York Times. When that story came out in December 2017, in the interviews, Dave Fravor, it includes one of the videos, and then testimony from Lou saying, yeah, I was in charge of this program. They were caught. They were cornered, and they had to come clean on it. Once the New York Times story comes out, other media start covering it. It gives political cover to members of Congress to say, maybe I want to look into this, which has continued for the last 2.5 years, having closed door hearings, asking direct questions, looking at the evidence for themselves. They wanted to know what's going on, and now they found that, in fact, these things are unidentified. We're not saying they're alien craft or interdimensionals or time travelers. It's just that we don't know, and they consistently show up in places where they should not be, in our controlled airspace, over sensitive installations, over military battle groups like the Nimitz group, and it's disconcerting. It may not be a direct threat, but it is threatening because they shouldn't be there and we don't know who they are or where they're from. Skepticism is a good idea. It's good to ask questions. But when your government is cornered and forced to admit, yeah, these things are unidentified, we've analyzed them, we've looked at the evidence, we don't know where they're from, they're not ours. They've asked the Air Force, they've asked the Army, they've asked the CIA, do these belong to you? And the answer is no. That the story in the New York Times changed everything. It changed the media environment, it changed the congressional environment, and it's led to one revelation after another. I think we're going to go to a break here soon, but we can get into that in our next segment.
Yeah, when we come back, Jeremy, I'd like to ask you a little bit about what you think of Mystery Wire, what your observations have been, what you've learned, what you've seen, and going through the website and looking at some of the old stuff with George. So we'll do that in just a moment. All right, that concludes the first half of our podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. For Duncan Phoenix, for Matt Adams, for George Knapp, and our special guest, Jeremy Corbell, I'm Ron Futrell. Thanks for listening, everybody. Part 2 coming up soon. Bye for now. Be safe out there.